Hello everyone, Mason here. How you doing? Today it's time for some recent reads. Welcome or welcome back. I hope your week's going well. Yeah, mine is, thanks for asking. I went go see The Matrix last night for my mum's birthday. I haven't been to the cinema in ages. I don't think I've been since Joker came out. It was actually quite a lot of fun, I enjoyed it. Although, having said that, I was pretty annoyed at one point. I always big up Cineworld, because unlike the Odeon or View, every single one of their screenings has audio description available. But then yesterday, we got our seats, film starts, audio description not working. Typical. Luckily, I was there with my mum, who's not afraid to get shit done, so she went off and within 15 minutes it was all sorted. Wanna know what I thought of the actual film? It was okay. There were some fun parts, the first half was better than the second half, but in the end I felt that it lacked the philosophical depth of the original trilogy. I sound like a right douchebag now though, don't I? It just felt a little bit pointless, but if we're honest, it only got made because people love Keanu Reeves, and in particular, they love his face. Anyway, this is Booktube, so why am I talking about a film? Basically just so I could have a chat with you, and so I had something for an intro. Right, okay, I won't waste any more time. Here's all the books that I've read recently, and what I thought of them. Lowen Ashley is a struggling author on the brink of financial collapse, but her luck changes when she's offered the opportunity of a lifetime. After best-selling author Verity suffers injuries that leave her unable to finish a highly successful series, her husband Jeremy hires Lowen to complete it. Lowen arrives at the Crawford home intending to search through Verity's notes and gather as much information as she needs to complete the series, but she makes an unexpected discovery. An autobiography, written by Verity, filled with page after page of chilling admissions, including Verity's recollection of what really happened the day her daughter died. At first, Lowen decides to keep the manuscript hidden from Jeremy. After all, he's a grieving father, and what Verity has written could break him. But as Lowen's feelings for Jeremy intensify, she begins to wonder if she could benefit from Jeremy reading it, because surely he couldn't continue to love his wife if he found out what kind of woman Verity really was. So, Verity is the first book I've read by Colleen Hoover, and I realise that it seems to be a bit of a departure from what she usually writes. I've got to say, this one's a dark one, guys. I mean, really dark. Now, as much as I enjoyed this one, I can definitely see how it would make certain people uncomfortable, especially parents. Yeah, there's probably some trigger warnings if you've got kids. Honestly, this one was a mixed bag. A bit of a sandwich, really. Didn't like the bread, really liked the filling. The bread was just a bit plain, a bit boring, maybe even a little bit stale, like you'd left it out on the side for too long and then... I'm taking this metaphor too far. It's a shame, but I felt that those first few chapters were quite boring. I wish it had just started when Lowen arrived at the Crawford home, because everything that came before that was just setup that gave you information you were then given later in the story anyway, so it felt like a waste of time. Rather than a sandwich, maybe it's better to say that this was like a roller coaster, because those first few chapters were like the start of a ride. You get strapped in and then you start to climb and you're waiting and waiting and you get to the top, and then suddenly you're plunging downwards and you're going into spirals and loops, and why am I getting carried away with metaphors today? My point is, once you get to the meat of the story, Verity is good. As soon as Lowen finds Verity's autobiography, everything starts to get dark as... yeah, it gets really, really dark. To tell you the truth, I'm walking on eggshells a bit here. I've got to be careful what I say, because this is one of those times where the less you know, the better the story's going to be, because it'll have more impact, and it'd be so easy to say something, even a small thing, that would be a massive spoiler. The narrative is split between what's happening in the present to Lowen and the years leading up to that, told through Verity's autobiography, which documents her romance with Jeremy. In the present, there are lots of creepy, unsettling things that make you wonder whether Lowen is a reliable narrator or not, but each time she dives into Verity's autobiography and reads another chapter, you're hit with more and more revelations of what a dark and twisted person Verity is. For once, I was gripped by both perspectives. I thought that Colleen Hoover did a pretty damn good job of finding that balance and getting it right, making each perspective equally interesting. They're both just dripping with tension, and overall Verity has this addictive feeling that leaves you unable to stop reading, like witnessing something beautiful and terrible that you can't look away from even though you're actually quite disturbed by what you're seeing. There are two narrators, one for each perspective, and even though neither of them was that great, I was so drawn in by the story that I just didn't care that much, to be honest. Unfortunately, the stuff that I liked was bookended by stuff that I really didn't. I've already mentioned that the first few chapters felt a bit boring, but I also had a problem with the ending. It seems that authors quite often feel like they have to add something in to show that they're not justifying certain actions, and Colleen Hoover definitely did that with the plot twist. I think it was designed to add an element of mystery to the equation, so that you're not necessarily sure what the truth was, but to me it felt like it softened some of the overall impact of the story. I tell you what though, Jeremy Crawford must be well fit, because Lowen and Verity go a little bit nuts for him despite the fact that he's not that interesting. In the end, I would definitely say that there was more that I liked than disliked, and I would recommend Verity to those who feel that they're ready for a bit of a dark and twisted story. One thing's for sure though, this would make a mint TV show. Verity is rated B for batshit. Next up on the agenda is While You Were Sleeping by Catherine Croft, which is a much more psychological whodunit type story. It centres around Tara Logan, who wakes up in bed next to a corpse. Lovely. She doesn't remember how she got there or what happened. The one thing she does know, for some reason, is that she didn't kill that guy. In all fairness, she does have good reasons for that. Knowing that everyone will assume that it was her, she gets up, gets dressed, and runs off home to pretend that nothing ever happened. Which, I'm sure you all know, doesn't necessarily work out as well as she thinks it's going to. It was pretty decent, to be honest. It definitely kept my attention, and as usual, I spent a lot of time playing Guess the Killer. I did get it right this time, sort of. I guess it doesn't really count if you guess every character in the story. There's lots of red herrings and finger pointing, each character has a "it's probably you" moment, but it never really becomes totally clear who it actually is until fairly late on. It's definitely guilty of trying so hard to make you think it's going to be a certain person that it's plainly obvious that it's not going to be them, but Catherine Croft did do a decent job of making me doubt myself at certain points, and I do appreciate when an author can do that. By the time the truth was eventually revealed, I had figured out what was going on, but at the same time it was pretty fun to see how it played out. One of the things that I did notice is it's very plot driven. There was basically no setting or physical descriptions of people. Other than the fact that we know it takes place somewhere in London, there was nothing distinctive about the setting, and I genuinely couldn't tell you what any of the characters looked like. My other main issue was with the police, and I mentioned this recently. Anytime the police are involved in a story that isn't a police procedural, they end up being idiots, and this was no exception. The main officer involved in the investigation is literally the worst. They share privileged information with someone that's a potential suspect, basically because he fancies her, and that's, not good, to say the least. It wasn't a thumbs up or a thumbs down, to be honest, it was just sort of a middle thumb. I wouldn't recommend it, but I wouldn't warn anyone against it either. It's a quick, easy read, and in the end, While You Were Sleeping is rated A for alright. Let's move on then and talk about One for Sorrow by Sarah A. Denzel. This one is about Leah Smith, a nurse at Cromont, a high security psychiatric hospital in Rotherham. She's appointed to Isabel Fielding, a 21-year-old who was convicted of murder at 21 when a child called Maisie Earnshaw was found dead in a duck pond. As Leah is getting to know Isabel, she just can't make sense of it. The brutality of the crime versus the sweet and gentle nature of the girl that she's taking care of, which makes us question whether Leah is allowing her past to affect her judgment, or whether a 14-year-old girl was framed for murder. I enjoyed this one quite a bit actually. My dad's side of the family are from Yorkshire, so the fact that this took place in Rotherham, which is a stone's throw away from where they live, was quite refreshing. But I'm always happy to read something set in the UK outside of London, if I'm honest. Once again, there's very little I can say without giving away spoilers, which is something that I desperately don't want to do, because I definitely think it's worth a read for fans of psychological thrillers. I liked the rural setting, the dark undertones, the mystery element was intriguing, and Sarah Ray Denzel actually throws in quite a few plot twists, which for once didn't feel overdone, and was actually quite fun. I was already enjoying it, but about halfway through, something happens that despite foreshadowing, I was too swept up in the story to see coming, and it really kicked things up a notch. As the story progresses, there's a mounting sense of tension, dread, and even paranoia. There's at least one part I can think of that got my adrenaline going. The climax is fun and intense, it leaves you wanting more, which is good because this is the start of a series and I'm genuinely looking forward to getting to the next one. One for Sorrow is rated R for recommended. Last but not least, I want to talk about A Study in Scarlet. Yep, that's right, I finally dipped my toe into the Sherlock Holmes canon. You know what? It was great. It was so much fun to at long last see how it all got started, the origin of the world's greatest bromance. Having watched A Study in Pink quite a few times at this point, the beats of the story are fairly familiar, although obviously there are differences because the modernisation of the story meant that certain elements had to be changed. There's also the fact that BBC's Sherlock is influenced and informed by over 100 years of the Sherlock canon having time to develop. It's a wink and a nod to the fandom. If you go into A Study in Scarlet expecting the obnoxious, sarcastic, sociopathic Sherlock, you're going to be disappointed because you're not going to get it. I don't know whether it develops later on in the canon, but this time around, he just seemed quiet and withdrawn, only really coming to life when there's something to work out or explain. In terms of things that stood out to me, I absolutely loved the dramatic irony of Watson wanting to meet Sherlock because he's been shaken up by his experiences and isn't up for excitement and noise. Sorry Watson, not gonna get your wish there mate. One of my favourite parts was Gregson coming to boast about how he solved the case. Of course he's entirely wrong about that, but Sherlock still lets him run through the entire story. I couldn't help but have a cynical laugh at one point there being a newspaper that says, "The government needs to be harder on foreigners. These sorts of crimes usually happen under liberal governments." I just couldn't help thinking, yeah, not much has changed then, has it? I guess the media's always been the same. More than anything though, the most amusing thing was how language has changed since Arthur Conan Doyle first published this. Is it immature? Yes it is. But I could not help laughing at the fact that every time Sherlock explains something, Watson is so impressed he ejaculates in admiration. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. There's an entire middle section that explains what happened to the cabbie, and although you're going to want to shoot me for this, it was so boring. The worst part is, it's kinda useless, because everything gets explained again when Sherlock catches the guy. A Study in Scarlet is rated B for bromantic. My question for today is this: who is your favourite set of fictional best friends? If you've enjoyed this video, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or I'll tie your shoelaces together and then tell you need to get home in a hurry because your house is on fire. If you want to get in touch, say hi and have a chat. You know where the comments section is, and the link to my Twitter can be found in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.